Good evening and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is an administrative assistant, Kayan Park, and today I'd like to welcome you again to 2021, the University of Edinburgh 윤보선 Memorial Symposium. This is the second day of the symposium, and today simultaneous interpretation is available for today. Please press the globe-shaped button at the bottom to select your language. And we're going to discuss about new agenda for South Korea-UK cooperation in the COVID-19 era under several sub-themes. So let's begin our second session. From now on, we'll start it. In this session, we'll discuss about international development and cooperation with three experts. In this session, Professor Chanuk Park will in charge of moderator and discussant. Chanuk Park is an emeritus professor of political science and international relations at Seoul National University. He served as acting president, executive vice president, and provost of Seoul National University. Please welcome Professor Park.
Good morning, UK participants, and good evening, Korean folks. Let us begin the session titled International Development Cooperation. This is today's first, but symposium's second session. As introduced a month ago, I am Chanuk Park. Park is the family name. I'm a retired professor of political science from Seoul National University. I'm very honored to moderate this session at this significant event. In this panel, we have two presenters. One is Professor Taegyun Kim, who is obviously standing next to me in this conference room, Seoul. Professor Kim is a professor of international development at the Graduate School of International Studies, Seoul National University. Professor Kim, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay, it's very nice to have you on this occasion.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right, the other presenter is Dr. Seojin Lim, a senior lecturer and courses leader in both MA North Korean Studies and MA Asia Pacific Studies at the University of Central Lancashire. Dr. Lim, good morning. You can hear me?
Hey. do you hear me and do you see me well?
Okay, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's really good to see you all there.
I wonder where you are. I mean, the location, probably in England or in Scotland?
Oh, I'm in the northwest of England.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's between Manchester and Liverpool, if that makes you have a better imagination for the map.
Yeah, I believe it is autumn, beautiful autumn in England as in Seoul.
Yeah, it is really raining a lot at the moment.
Okay, it's very good to meet you. All right, you know, this session will run for 1 hour and 20 minutes. Each presenter will be given 20 minutes or so for initial presentation, and later 10 minutes for responding to questions and making further comments. Professor Taegyun Kim will start off to present on new issues of international development in the COVID-19 era. Please welcome Professor Kim. Go ahead.
Thank you very much indeed. Very nice introduction. Also, the good morning and in UK, Dr. Lim. We are very long time like the good friends. So we studied together and then they make a tour to research something on international development before. So it's very, very, the welcome and it's very good to see you through the virtual meeting today. All right, so my topic is new issues of international development in the COVID-19 era. But actually, I just submitted the paper based upon the South Korean experiences. How we can just enhance like the state-society synergy through the mutual or mixed accountability in the case of COVID-19, especially in response to the COVID-19, the disease, infectious disease. But today, I just prepared the what could be defined as new issues of international development, especially in this era, the COVID-19 or corona, the pandemic, or post-corona pandemic, within 30 minutes. Okay, so there will be three parts today. First one is corona pandemic and global governance. So I will investigate a little bit, very briefly, what it is the main symptom of corona pandemic affecting the global governance, a structure of global governance, and what could be the crisis of global governance in dealing with or handling corona pandemic. And then I'm going to move on some of the multiple crises, the combining the corona pandemic as well as other, the affected the arena of COVID-19. And finally, I'm going to move on to some of the new issues and how we can tackle against the common goals of COVID-19 or the after COVID-19. And finally, I'm going to get to some point of the South Korean role. What could be the function or roles of South Korea? All right, so briefly, this is quite the famous graph. So everyone knows what is the meaning of the different graph, in this like COVID-19, the global situation. So the still pandemic situation is going on, and then some of the quarantine policies, and after that, we got some of the vaccines, so vaccinized, but still we are, suffering from the kind of disease and its impact on our life. So you can see some of the different curve of the COVID-19 and especially after the 2020 and up to now. Okay, I just pick up the first point of the global governance is the main problem of global governance in this era, COVID-19. That's the rebirth of the aggressive nationalism. So you can see that's the Financial Times, the article, newspaper article, the return of the nation state, or strong mass always surrounded by the ideology, a kind of new return of the nation state. Because of COVID-19, so still we have, different, the president, in this case of the U.S., from the Trump to now to Joe Biden, but still there are some debate on, what would be, the main ideology covering up the next 10 years or the next decades, replacing globalism or globalization. So one of them could be, national state or the nationalism, or our nation should be going first, something like that. So, but paradoxically, it is a high time to work together, more consolidated global cooperation. So we have the globalization, maybe the first generation globalization, like the 1980s, 1990s, and up to I think the before corona pandemic. But after that, the rebirth of the aggressive nationalism. But on the other hand, we have to think of what could be next step to get together, to overcome this kind of crisis through the global cooperation. So it means that the international cooperation, international development, that is the main or the very important topic for everyone. So as far as I know, Dr. Lim will talk about today SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and what could be the main crisis of the implementing the SDGs. So that we can just put together later how we can see the next step for global cooperation, and then some of the main hurdle or the loophole in implementing SDGs. So vaccine should be, that's the second point of this slide. So vaccine should be treated as the global public goods. So nation state, they just occupy some of the vaccines and they dominate the global chain or supply chain of the vaccines and production mechanism of the vaccine. But on the other hand, the global governance or global community, they launched so-called COVAX facility, and then they just put their effort to re-recognize the vaccines as the global public good. Of course, there are some limits, and there's some kind of different approach to how we can see, the vaccine as global public good. But we have some common target. We need like the public size vaccine as global, I think the asset for everyone. Otherwise, we just continue like the recircle of, the vicious circle of, I think, crisis. Okay, there is a second topic under the global governance and in the corona pandemic situation. So do authoritarian or democratic states handle the pandemic better? So there are some variations. Even the, in the range of the authoritarian states, as well as the democratic states. So if you look at the first table, that is the case of the authoritarian states. There are some successful cases, including China, Singapore. Of course, the China, I think there are some debates on the China is a really successful case or not. But officially they declare, the China is to overcome some, the corona pandemic difficulties. So we can just include China and Singapore as the good case for the success story in handling the corona pandemic in the case of the authoritarian regime. On the other hand, if you look at on the right side in the first table, there's the failure case. So Iran and Turkey, there are many different cases. In this the era of authoritarian states. But if you look at the second table, of course, there are some variations. So the success or failure. So success cases includes South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and the failure case, I think that typically the G7 countries, very advanced economies, they're suffering still from the current pandemic, and then the India and other cases. So what is your argument? So still the democratic states is like the better option for your country as the political system or not? So the more important thing is the institutional learning process. For example, effects from the MERS and SARS or other infectious diseases. So you have some previous experiences in handling some the infectious disease, and you got some kind of lessons from the experiences. That is, I think, one of the very critical factor to the, I think you can say this case is still very success or failure. So political system versus, I think, the institutional learning process, which one is the most important factor in dealing with the corona pandemic. All right, and the next one is the very famous, the photo. The first one is the Cornwall, the G7 meeting, the summit, and then at the bottom, there is the Chinese, the very famous illustrator, do painting like that. So the corona factor speeds up U.S.-China strategic competition. I think today, the second session will deal with that topic, strategic competition or rivalry between the U.S.-China in the post-corona pandemic era. I think that the G7, one of the key results of G7 Cornwall summit, that is the reverse of the liberal international order. And Joe Biden declared like the America is back. And then the LI or liberal international order, once again reset by the cooperation by the G7 plus like the 3 or 4 or more democracies, so D10 or D11, including South Korea. And also the G7, they produced like the good kind of cooperative kind of platform, so-called the B3W, so the Build Back Better World. That's the main theme of infrastructure investment declared by Joe Biden and then its allies, the G7, all the G7 countries, including the South Korea. So almost like 10 countries agreed to support this new initiative. So B3, Build Back Better World. And then of course we have another challenge against the liberal international order. That's China. So China, the 일대일 law in Korean, but BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. So there are two big giants now. You can think of how we can see infrastructure investment and infrastructure-related cooperation could be divided into two different big groups. I think China and China-led at the Global South, and then the G7-led Global North, And then what could be the main, I think, the buffer zone between them. So I think that in the I think the last comment from my presentation, so South Korea, one of the South Korea function could be, I think, defined as the, like, I don't know, the bridger between the global north and global south. And then in the second, painting, it just described like the very, harsh critic by the China. So the American eagle, and if you look at on the right side, the American eagle, the British, the English lion, and the Canadian bear, and the very on the right hand, the Indian elephant. But there is no any Korean. There's no any South Korea. So I don't know how, still Chinese leaders and the normal people like the illustrator think of the South Korean position. Okay, and then another one is the we won't get back. So after Corona pandemic, I don't think that we can just go back like the previous stage, normality. So the reflection of climate change. So many people, the pundits, they talk about climate change, the crisis. So this week and last week, the key political leaders from all different countries got together in UK to talk about some climate change and then the key, these dangers and then the crisis, how we can handle them. So-called the COP26. So the climate change is one of the very important topic after the corona pandemic erupted. And then second one is from the against the corona pandemic, so COVID-19 to the with COVID-19. So we have to live together with the COVID-19. So that means the lifestyle or some of the life pattern should be adaptive or should be changed in this new kind of phenomena like the COVID-19, because we have to live together. And then finally, the routinization of virtual education services, virtual meetings, just like today, we can see each other, so we have to get through the virtual meeting, this kind of Zoom meeting, because quite I think it's very effective. Sometimes very, cautious. Not the meeting together, but still we have the problem, right? So face-to-face has another strength and then some advantages. So how we can just mix together the virtual and then the face-to-face in the new era. All right, so, and the next one is the new type of global governance actors, so alternative. So global funds, the typical case is the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, and then Gavi and other type of the global funds. So, but unfortunately, Melinda and Bill Gates now divorced, so probably they have to change the name, like the Bill Gates Foundation or Melinda Gates Foundation, whatever. So there is the new emerging like the actor, very powerful. In terms of financial power, I think sometimes bigger than the one single like the country, South Korea. So they can very easily collect the funds to support like the vaccines in dealing with the COVID-19. And the second candidate is the international angel. So very traditional international global NGOs, Oxfam, World Vision, Save the Children, and so on. So they're still very powerful actors. So sometimes challenge against the nation state, or work together with some international organizations. So we cannot ignore their power, and then they kind of move with what kind of the partners in dealing with what kind of topic, what kind of sectors of international development. And the third one, global civil society. So beyond the nation state, beyond the national territories, the civil society organization can make their own one voice against like the so-called the UN or other multilateral organizations. So they set up the so-called the World Social Forum in parallel with the World Economic Forum, Davos Forum. So annually they had a meeting just beside the Davos to review the World Economic Forum's policies and proposals, and they made their own proposals, very alternative proposals to Davos Forum. And finally, private sector, the companies and firms, and transnational cooperation as well. So now the enhancing the corporate social responsibility through the PPP, the private-public partnership, also the ESG, environment and society and governance. So those jargons is now popularized through the whole world. So we can recognize the importance of private sector in the engagement in this field of the international development. All right, so I'm going to review very briefly the multiple crises of global governance. So there are many points, but I'm going to summarize only 2 points from the 6 different factors of failures. The first one, we have very, the serious problem in making global governance more accountable. The reason is the structural problem, or the UN system has some dependencies. So let me say the financial dependencies on members, the money. Members, more specifically the earmarked funding. So every single UN agency has 2 different sources of financing. The first one is non-core funding, second is core funding. So non-core funding means, for example, World Food Program or WHO, they receive some money, donation, or the official dues from the member countries, but in the form of non-core funding, that funding is earmarked by donor countries. So WHO cannot use that for their own purpose. They just kind of implementing agency. For example, South Korean government put just earmark to WFP for the South Korean Trust Fund. So South Korean government won't use that. Those money just transferred to the North Korea because we cannot supply North Korea directly with our money. So we just put the earmark and conditions, and WFP just implement it with our money for the purpose of South Korea, like the target. So if you look at on the right side, the second point, the extremely large portion of the non-core funding in UN agencies. The case of WFP, World Food Program, more than 90% is non-core funding. And then only 5% of the core funding is core funding. So core funding means WFP use that for their own purpose, for their own sake. So it's dependent on the donors, earmarked donors, like conditionality. So if you look at the WHO, also 85%, that's non-core funding, almost 90%. So if the Trump government criticized very harshly, WHO is pro-China, right? So they decided to withdraw the membership from the WHO. But in reality, WHO don't have any choice because money always limited in responding to COVID-19 because 85% already earmarked. So that part is the one of very important and the serious, I think, the factor we can see as the failure of the global governance. A second point of this slide, that's the lack of global accountability. So who's going to be accountable? Who's going to be taking responsibility in the spreading out, the supplying the vaccines to everyone in the world, especially the global south, the fragile states and the poor countries. Nobody cares. And then now it's China, it's like hegemony power, all the representative of the whole global south, and then they just using so-called vaccine, the diplomacy, the providing the vaccine with any charge, with no charge to all the BRI member countries or partner countries. So that could be one of the threat to, I think, the U.S.-led liberal international order, or the U.S., kind of hegemony power, or U.S.-China, strategic the competition. So this is the very clear kind of diagram showing the 85% is non-core funding in the case of WHO. So you can go to the website of WHO and you can easily download this kind of diagram, and then you can just confirm. And then this is another dimension of the multiple crisis. That is according to the Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General UN. He just talked about the last year, So the 2020, we had the health crisis, right? So COVID-19. And then he just make, the same kind of signal, and it's actually the warning to every single member country. So 2021, we will have the food crisis. It's quite closely related to the health crisis. And then maybe next year, we have another round of the crisis. There could be the climate change or climate crisis. Finally, all crises are connected, interconnected, and then the development as a whole, either northern country, southern country, and poor country, rich countries, they could have the common problem. There is a development, lacking development, the process. Okay, this is to show another map describing how China, BRI, Central South-South Cooperation engaged the what kind of countries? Almost all countries in the world, even U.S. So the China provide the one single aid or the multiple aid or the other types of aid to almost every country in the world in the era of the COVID-19. So you can see this map. This is the academic finding done by the German Development Institute. So if you really want to get this kind of map, I will let you know later. This is another map. So the China domination, the vaccine supply chains. So you can compass on two lines, the one belt, one load, and then the vaccine supply chains connected to one belt, one load, covering the Africa through the Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Central Asia up to Europe, and of course including the eastern side of the Africa. And then now I think that we have another new things, the Latin America is now included in the map of the vaccine supply chains dominated by China. Right, so shortly I'm going to review some of the new global issues, so-called the international development. So actually the international community, UN has the one framework covering so-called from the Yokohama strategies back in 1994, Hyogo framework 2005, and Sendai framework 2015. Most likely focus on the natural disaster and the resilience. But that framework, Sendai framework, is the last version of the framework endorsed by the UN. Of course, the initiative by Japan. That framework just losing ground of corona pandemic, infectious disease. So they slightly touch on how to handle, how to respond to the infectious disease, but there is no any concrete message, concrete policies. So still we have some big loophole in the Sendai framework. So we can just fit in some our good experiences, how to handle the COVID-19 into Sendai framework. So I just put in the bottom, connecting the Sendai framework with the COVAX, the facility, or the WHO international health regulations. So I think in that point, South Korea can find some kind of role. We have some good example of how to handle the COVID-19. So K quarantine, something like that. And then we can share the good practices with the Global South, all the like-minded countries like New Zealand, the Australia. And then we just tossed all good practices into Sendai framework in collaboration with Japan. So those kind of mechanisms should be, I think, backed by global governance, a global community, and also the like-minded countries. So I'll talk about it later, what is the like-minded country alliance. And then the next one is the international cooperation, the major issues. The first one, I already talked about the serious problem. That's the financial dependencies of the UN. So we have to reform. Otherwise, there's no the exit strategy in this kind of multiple crisis. So reforming the current financial dependencies of UN agencies. So how to increase co-funding, how to decrease non-co-funding. I don't have the idea how to answer that question, but there is the main backbone of the multiple crises in this global governance. And second one is reconciling the U.S.-China stress competition. So I don't think I'm not going to repeat again because the next session will, deeply, deal with this topic. So the build back better world versus BRI. That I'm pretty sure that could be the main issue in the next 10 years or 20 years. And the third one, expecting the budget support schemes. I think Dr. Lim is the expert on this issue, the budget support. So not through we don't have to send out the workers or the companies or the experts, aid experts to the local community. But we can just send money, budget, through our bank account to the bank account recipient countries directly. So that is the one way how we can avoid the limit of the COVID-19, not face-to-face kind of the contacting. And the next one is enhancing global accountability via the whole society approach. There is my article I already submitted through the proceedings. So the state, society, cooperation. So traditionally, state is always try to control society, and society always the challenge against state. But we can find some good example. State, society sometimes can work together to support the common goals. So COVID-19, how to flatten the COVID-19 curve. So that is Daegu. I mean, in South Korea, Daegu. I think the episode is we can filter by their framework, state society synergy effect. And then finally, enriching the integrated approach in the era of the multiple cases. So the UN is highly now, they encourage all member countries to think of the HDP nexus. The meaning is the humanitarian development peace nexus. So we cannot just focus on one topic at once. So we have to think of how we can just the broadening effect of the one single factor to the other neighboring areas. So the humanitarian crisis could be connected to development and finally peace formation. So I think the South Korea, North Korea, or Korean Peninsula could be good. Target for the HDP nexus in the next decade. All right. So very finally. So we need some new leadership, maybe China, maybe US, I don't know, maybe global North and global South, and probably some new role from the middle power formation, so including South Korea, because this is a very important and good timing and good, I think, the kind of timing for South Korea or other middle power countries, especially the Australia and New Zealand, because we are kind of a success nation in handling the COVID-19. And also the global governance is now always their power and their effectiveness is weakening and further in this the time period. So we can just claim that together with the other like-minded country, so global governance should be reformed, and then the dependence, especially finance dependence of UN agencies should be reformed. Who's going to claim that kind of point? I think the South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia, maybe Germany, or some of the Nordic countries, they just make their own kind of coalition to claim those kind of the weaknesses of global governance, and then we can take an initiative to the reform those, I think, the factors. Right. So I will stop here, and then I'm going to take some kind of comments from the floor and the other commentators. Thank you very much indeed. And then so we're going to move on.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kim, for your interesting and well-organized presentation. Now we move on to Dr. Lim for her presentation. The title is Sustainable Development Goals and Development Aid in the COVID-19 Era. Its subtitle is A Comparative Study of UK and South Korea. UK and South Korea. All right. Please welcome Dr. Lim.
Thank you very much. I can't share the screen. It says that host disabled the participant screen sharing. Can I ask to share? Can I ask that I can share the screen share? Oh, now I can do. Thanks.
Okay, where's
All right.
okay, that's it.
Is it the yeah? So, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the 윤보선 Symposium, and also thanks a lot for Professor Young-Mi Kim at Edinburgh University to invite me here today to have an opportunity to give a presentation about this topic. My presentation today is mainly based on my forthcoming book written by the Professor Sang Hee-jung at Keimyung University about the COVID-19 post-COVID-19 international development cooperation in South America. And I used some data about UK because there was some part about UK British aid providing to Latin America, and about the also South Korea's aid providing to the Latin America as well. So before I go through to the case between UK and South Korea, I'd like to talk about briefly about the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG situation, and how COVID-19 affected. The very beginning of the thought about this talk began from the donor motivations. As Professor Taekyun Kim presented earlier, it looks like the world is becoming a true nation state rather than having this, for example, the global health issues and vaccines as public goods. They don't treat them in that way anymore. So in theory, the development aid especially needs to be provided based on the altruistic reasons, but it's becoming more and more based on the self-interest of each nation country. But what we are aiming for at the global community is to achieve so-called SDG by 2030 based on these 17 goals. And that was why the development aid has become jeopardized, as I will show at the end of this presentation, based on what we are experiencing from the COVID-19. The main value, the core value of the SDG began from the idea of leave no one behind. And all these 17 goals are interconnected each other. We can't separate only one issue from the other, but they need to be developed all together, and then we can achieve these developments in the countries. But the COVID-19 not only reversed the achievement of SDGs up until now, but reversed the approach of donor countries and approach of these ideas of global goals. And now many of people in developing countries especially are left behind. This is the ODA trend, especially for the health sector, and it's quite natural to see the surge of ODA going into the health sector before COVID-19 began in 2018, especially if we see here the ODA to health sector, well, after some fluctuation was a little bit decreasing, but after COVID-19, we now see that it's increasing more and more. And not only about that, because of this COVID-19, now we realize that in many countries, the healthcare system can be quite fragile. And especially, for example, the case of North Korea, which Professor Taekyun Kim also mentioned, the healthcare system in North Korea, if we want to provide any aid, needs to be able to accommodate or facilitate, for example, the Pfizer vaccines. When the COVAX tried to provide the vaccines, it had to be AstraZeneca rather than Pfizer because of this certain requirement of the vaccine save the environment. So because of that, now these chain of actions under SDG regime has been broken. And now we have more focus on the health sector. And also the progress, as I mentioned, now is already, we see that it's been reversed. In terms of the ODA disbursement, if we see the bilateral donors aid amount is quite decreased a lot. It's because of the domestic concerns as well. And rather than increasing ODA budget, many of the countries, we expect that they tend to decrease because they have their own national interest at the moment in their own economies. And if we see the components of grant aid, which needs to be increased in theory, decreased a lot more than the loan aid. And also, these international financial institutions aid increased, which means loan aid increased rather than grant aid. So because the international financial institutions tend to provide loan aid than a grant aid. So this means that the developing countries will be under more burden of the debt afterwards. So this is the situation at the moment. In summary, the ODA, the bilateral ODA is decreasing and loan ODA is increasing. Then how it is like in the individual donor cases, that will be the focus of today's talk. And I will go through between UK and South Korea. In the UK, previously, as one of those global leading donor country, UK made 0.7% of ODA against GNI as a legal requirement in the country. And there are not many countries who keep this the requirement. And Luxembourg, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and the UK are only 5 countries who provide ODA at 0.7% of its GNI, and the rest of other donors provide a lot less than this percentage. And during the COVID-19 period, what happened in the UK? For example, in July 2020, the government promised to pledge £769 million to stop the spread of COVID-19 at the international level. And 1/3 of that amount was committed to the CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. Simply, they are the ones who are developing vaccines. And in January 2021, earlier this year, £250 million was sent to COVAX. And it also mobilized about $1 billion from other global donors. This shows that the UK government provided aid to more multilateral, through the multilateral channel than through the bilateral assistance scheme. But the problem there is that UK also now is in quite under the economic hardship because UK, as you may well know, was under COVID-19 lockdown quite for a long time. And also it was coincided with Brexit. And domestically in the UK at the moment, we are experiencing quite a few difficult issues to deal with. Then amid this situation, the previous independent department which provided aid in the UK, the Department for the International Development, we call it DFID, was merged into the Foreign Affairs FCO, the Foreign and Commonwealth Department. And now the FCO became the FCDO, which is Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office since September last year. And by doing it, there was the parliament discussion, and it was passed that aid commitment will be reduced from 0.7% to 0.5% of GNI. It's quite a lot of amount in the real term. And it's also partially based on the rationale that the previous EU the commitment to EU from Britain no longer is provided, and that amount could be reduced also as well in post-Brexit period. And then just last week, the Chancellor of the UK announced the budget plan. We call it the 2021 budget for the future in the UK. And he promised that the 0.7 target will be rescheduled and will be returned. But the critics are saying that it's really unlikely. So in the result, the ODA amount of the UK has decreased enormously as the one of those leading donor country. And that was quite a concern. And also the other problem was questioned, raised whilst the UK government invested a lot of ODA budget into the vaccine development. And we were really doubtful whether it could be the eligible to become the ODA, because ODA is, as it is written, it is overseas development assistance. It should be provided to overseas. But by developing a vaccine within the UK, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, we expected that because it was by the ODA budget of the UK, we expected that it could be provided more to developing countries. But at the moment, the vaccine has been deployed within the UK massively, and only a small amount of vaccines have been just dispersed to other developing countries. So this UK first approach, like Professor Kim called it as a nation states approach, has been really strengthened. And also there has been a lot of waste of vaccine in the UK. People just don't turn up to the vaccine stations because they are worried about the side effects. And also there were some kind of stories behind, for example, there's some kind of chips can go into your body to monitor yourself. So these vaccines have been wasted. They were not given to the developing countries. And only surplus vaccines have been available for developing countries. So this obviously, the vaccine is not has not been dealt as the public goods, and it's really has become the worrisome in the sense of international development spirit. And also in terms of the SDGs achievement and implementation, the UK's focus now has become a lot more on from health sector, of course, then now to the climate change. And at the moment at Glasgow, we are having COP26. And UK government said that further £2 billion aid budget cut will be expected prior to the COP26 2 weeks ago. And those cuts will affect mostly for those, unfortunately, in needs more of the ODA, especially for the low-income countries and lower middle-income countries who are most vulnerable to the climate change. And that is quite paradox. And also this cut of this 0.7 to 0.7% of ODA of GNI. Now the UK government will focus three main areas with this reduced amount. Number one area will be special drawing rights, SDR we call it, which means ODA lending through the IMF, which will be mostly about the loan aid, not grant aid. Then the countries who receive this ODA will be under debt eventually. And it's permitted by OECD DOC as ODA, but UK is the only country who is providing this scheme. And also vaccine donations will be a part of the ODA budget and debt relief. So if you see the graphs here, it shows how these changes look like in more detail. And if we move to the South Korean case, South Korea is a country, the very first country who turned from war-torn federal country to OECD DOC donor country. And it's been now about 20 years for South Korea to work as one of those traditional donor groups. And South Korean government provide the strategy of a win-win ODA, which means it's not only beneficial for developing countries, but also benefits South Korea itself. And also it has quite a unique system of ODA between grant and loan aid. Anyway, so the South Korea's ODA amount is not a lot itself, and its commitment has been increasing in terms of the ODA of GNI percentage. During the COVID-19, South Korea came up with a very clear strategy towards its ODA. As I mentioned, South Korea has a bipolarized system in between grant and loan aid. So for the grant aid, the main grant aid agency is KOICA, International Korea Cooperation Agency. And KOICA came up with the program so-called ABC. So agenda for building resilience against COVID-19 through development cooperation. And it came up with a very clear direction what it wants to provide for COVID-19. And I haven't seen the website like this when I compared other donor countries to show clearly how this agency provides aid to other countries. And all data was published here, and it's quite transparent. And it was really easy to find out information. Unlikely countries like France, Germany, which are also another leading donor countries in Europe, it was not easy to find what was their COVID-19 aid strategies were like. And in terms of the numbers, it was not so clear to find at one clear website. But KOICA came up with this website, which I evaluate highly. And in comparison, the Korea Export-Import Bank, which is commissioned by the Minister of Finance for this Korea's loan aid, also came up with so-called post-COVID strategy. It has 4 pillars: green and digital EDCF, health EDCF, diversification of development finance, and system effectiveness. But it's not detailed as KOICA did, but still in the summary, the Korea provide quite strong strategy towards COVID-19 ODA provision. And Korea was not the exceptional case in terms of the ODA amount during the COVID-19, because within the Korea, it also had to focus on the COVID-19 relief package for the people who are affected by COVID-19. So there was the decrease of the ODA amount in 2020, but in 2022, we expect that it will increase again based on the government announcement, recent announcement. And also government wants to provide more budget to COVAX so that all developing countries can receive vaccines. And also if then we can compare to, sorry about the typo, this is not in the UK, it's a South Korean case. If we think about the SDGs and the COVID-19 and aid in South Korea, it's not much different from UK case. South Korea initially focused on health sector of the ODA budget for the COVID-19, but then now due to the climate change conferences, this year, the government tends to focus more on the climate issues than health at the moment. There was a constant increase of energy ODA anyway, and Korea hosted a partnering for green growth and the global goals 2030 this year, which was originally scheduled for last year. And also now at the moment, the government, as I understand, is negotiating to host the next COP 28 to hold it in Korea. And that's why Korean government is focusing on the climate change issues at the moment more, along with the ODA budget. And also the Korea recently also had the Green Climate Fund increase, and also the previous UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has been appointed as a GGGI head, and in that way, Korea now inevitably has to focus more on climate change in its ODA, and that is looks like quite a trend in between the UK and Korea. So I came up with this conclusion that the donor motivations jeopardized throughout this pandemic period, and the countries who are known to be more altruistic or provide aid based on their diplomatic reasons or political reasons now became more their own countries, their nation's interest and for their people, and not many donors from my case studies focus on the public goods, but rather focus on the national interest first. And also the SDG finance jeopardized. When we came up with SDG in 2016, the Kim Yong, president of the World Bank, said that if we needed the $1 billion for MDG implementation, then we will need $1 trillion for the SDG implementation. That was quite metaphoric in a way that we need a lot of money. But now, not only we see the decrease of ODA, we also see the towards new direction of the focus of ODA. Rather than focusing on the SDG itself, it has been quite focused in certain areas like health, and now more about the climate change. So this SDG values, the leave no one behind, has been jeopardized as well. Now leave majority behind has become like unintentional scheme. And in terms of this, the chains, even not health sector anymore, but more about energy, the climate change and food security, and these energy sectors are at the highlighted focus. So that is the main findings from this analysis from my presentation today, and it would be great if I have some comments and feedbacks. Thank you.
Appreciate your enlightening presentation. And now let me make some remarks on both presentation in my capacity as a discussant. I've enjoyed listening to a presentation, and this is a good opportunity for me to learn something about international development. Professor Kim initially submitted a paper which is an interesting explication of South Korea's success in coping with the corona pandemic. In the paper, Kim assessed K-quarantine practices very positively. Professor Kim also has suggested that K-quarantine generated state-society synergy based upon a range of important factors, such as institutionalized learning effects from the MERS pandemic, voluntary civic engagement, and so on. Professor Kim's presentation today deals with important issues of global governance in handling the pandemic. The paper and the PowerPoint file are complementary to each other and both insightful, which help us understand international development in the post-corona era. Globally, we seem to witness the return of self-centered nationalism. Also, we are entering into the age of US-China rivalry in every sphere of our life. The COVID-19 pandemic complicates the rivalries between the two giant countries. For instance, Kim mentioned China's domination of vaccine supply chains. I would like to know how the South, that is developing countries, perceive and assess China's efforts for the pandemic control in quality and quantity terms. How the rivalry between the two great powers relate to lessening global vaccine equity and socioeconomic inequalities. Obviously, the next session is related to this issue, but I want to hear a bit about this issue too from Professor Kim. Okay, also let me mention Korea's COVID-19 situation. From this November on, the Korean government has adopted a living with COVID strategy, using social distancing measures stepwise. Professor Kim's framework for describing Korea's success in pandemic control is highly insightful. Despite the success of the model, however, Professor Kim concludes that the Korean model cannot be emulated by developing countries because the model is uniquely homegrown within Korea's specific context. Here's my question. If the model has no value of wider applicability for learning how to cope with the pandemic, can it be really a model in a normative sense? So my question is, apart from serving as a model of state-society synergy for controlling COVID-19, in which other specific ways can Korea contribute to international development cooperation beneficial to developing countries? Well, Kim mentioned a bit about the provision of vaccine, but in other ways, can Korea contribute to this purpose? That's my question. I have also learned a lot from Dr. Lim's presentation on a comparative study of UK and South Korea regarding the provision of development aid in the COVID-19 era. Dr. Lim showed that the world average of the SDG index score has decreased in the COVID-19 era. The pandemic is evidently a setback for sustainable development. Like Professor Kim, Dr. Lim also suggests that COVID-19 had negative effects on international development cooperation. Now the global village is faced with complex, multi-faceted failure in governance, global governance. This failure occurs structurally and also financially. According to Dr. Lim, South Korea's ODA also decreased in 2020. South Korea spends 0.15% of GNI on ODA, a far lower level than a UN standard of 0.7% for advanced countries. Now South Korea is recognized as an advanced country in the international community. My question is this. Dr. Lim, do you think that South Korea is playing a proper role in international development cooperation? With reference to UK in particular, in which way can you advise the Korean government or private sector leaders to enhance international development cooperation vis-a-vis developing countries? I think a good example event of bilateral or multilateral cooperation involving the UK and South Korea is taking place now at the COP26 summit in Glasgow, Scotland. South Korea as well as the UK are expected to actively participate in international cooperation for resolving the climate crisis by way of achieving a carbon neutrality. Okay, before we ask each presenter for response, I want to conduct the Q&A with the audience. I wonder whether there are questions or comments by anyone from the audience. I have a message. There's no question from the floor, all right? Okay, so, all right. First, Professor Kim, your remarks, please.
All right, thank you so much. Very insightful comments and questions. I don't know how I can respond to your very important question, but the first question is about the developing country responses or their perspective on the Chinese engagement through the vaccine diplomacy and other maybe BRI, other the engagement. So with this, sometimes the infrastructure investment. From my viewpoint, China, Xi Jinping, probably we have some the expert, Professor An and other top scholars, top-notch scholars. They're sitting here, but very kind of low profile of the knowledge on the China. But Xi Jinping got kind of the meeting immediately after the break out of the COVID-19 2020. I guess that was back in the April or May of 2020. So kind of summit of COVID-19 responses. So, and then Xi Jinping just declared that the China has some highly willingness to the kind of refund or the debt crisis. So that crisis kind of biggest problem, the BRI, the implementation process from the perspective of the developing partner countries. So huge debt, and it could be maybe they don't have to pay back because of the China has the new kind of BRI 2.0 policy, and then they can give another round of cooperation with the the neighboring countries. So for example, China-Pakistani, the economic corridor project. So Pakistan, they finally declared a moratorium. So because of huge debt from the BRI, the investment, so they want to get some the bailout program from the IMF. So IMF decided to engage the Pakistani case. So that happened the very early 2020. So China just probably changed the policies and their perspective how to meet some the demands from the developing countries, particularly the neighboring, along with the One Belt and One Road. And the second question about the South Korean, the experiences, like the good practice in the handling the COVID-19 through the state-society synergy. As I already briefly mentioned, traditionally the relationship between the state and society is not that positive. So state always try to control, regulate the civil society, and civil society has some challenging or the watchdog. So they needed to make some kind of the alternative pattern for the public or private policies against the state. But Peter Evans, he just make the new type of the relationship between two actors in dealing with the public policy making. So that is the 1995. He just named the kind of framework, state-society synergy. And the Elinor Ostrom, he got some intuition from the Elinor Ostrom, the IAD framework. So after that, there are many good cases how we can prove out we can develop the synergy, positive relationship between the state and society. But the condition, if we talk about this is a good example for the state-society synergy, we need to have the strong society. So we need some kind of very, contentious. Contentious is quite the very strong word, but there are some able, partners in a civil society. So civil society has the enough like the knowledge, enough I think these resources, and then the also the manpower to do something. So in the case of Daegu crisis, I mean the CSO engaged with the COVID-19. So they sending the nurses and then the volunteers to tackle against the corona pandemic situation in Daegu. So they just share their information through their own apps or other types of the the method through the I think the sometimes like kind of platform with the shared with the government and the state, and then with the other voluntary agencies. So the state society synergy, it always require like some kind of balancing of I think the enabling mechanism between the state and society. So that's why I'm just my final remark on my paper. South Korean experience cannot be exported to other, especially developing countries, because developing countries, they don't have, I mean, good like, or quite contentious like civil society against the state. So maybe one of the best solutions to support the civil society, I mean the developing countries, through the good practices, good experiences through the Daegu and other corona pandemic responses. How to support the civil society, how to support the local community in developing countries through the ODA, through the international development. So that's my answer. So sorry about it, it's quite a limit.
Okay, thank you. Well, I report a question sent from the Southern Hemisphere. Okay, let me read this. Greetings from Australia. Thanks for the interesting talks. I wonder what led Korea to increase its ODA in 2022 when many conventional donors cut the AG cut. I think it's a commitment, not realization yet. But anyway, it's committed. Can it be related to Korea's explicit pursuit of national interest through green and digital aid? What are the public's reactions? TRIPS, TRIPS. TRIPS waiver is the top priority agenda for civil society worldwide. What is the position of the Korean government or the development sector regarding this issue? I think this question is for Dr. Lim. Okay. Now I ask for Dr. Lim for response.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Park Chanuk Park, and thank you very much for the listening for my presentation. And before I begin my begin to talk about my response to the Professor Park, yes, it was really good to see you, Professor Taekun Kim again online. It was quite a surprising moment to see that we are in the same level panel. Yes, about the question from the Professor Park, very important question, but very big question, and it's quite not easy to elaborate the response in one good way. As I see the South Korea is playing a role in the international cooperation, I don't define South Korea as an advanced donor. I rather define South Korea as it is a middle power donor. As Professor Park mentioned in his comment, South Korea's ODA amount itself is a lot lower than compared to those leading donors, and because of that, when South Korea provides aid, it's more or less in a way to utilize ODA as a public diplomacy rather than provide in terms of the big push approach way like other so-called traditional donors do. Because of that reason, South Korea needs to find kind of niche way rather than trying to part of this big group. For example, the UK doesn't need to focus on each small project, but it's rather focused on in this big size of amount of donor when it provides donors to certain countries. And also it contributes a lot of its budget amount through the multilateral channels rather than focusing on its bilateral channels. And because of that, South Korea needs to, well, can be differentiated from the UK, because it's not like the countries like UK. So my point of view is that for South Korean government, now it's true middle power country. Already President Moon Jae-in was invited to the G7 earlier this year, and that kind of evidently showed us that along with Australia and other countries, South Korea has become the middle power country, and it needs to kind of scale up the ODA more to become this middle power country in the international cooperation as well. And for private sector as well, for example, if I see here in the UK, many of the private sector, including university, which is not private sector though, but these organizations, they tend to follow government's directions in terms of, for example, the COP26 and the climate change. Then universities, we are also obliged to follow the government directions in order to be the global citizens. So the private sectors are also pretty much engaged in these discussions with the government. So the South Korean government also can encourage private sector entities to become more part of this global the cooperation process. Then we can utilize the middle power country concept better in the international cooperation as well. And about the question from the Jaeun No, to be honest, I can't tell what exactly was the rationale behind it, but my assumption is that as Professor Park said, it's commitment yet. And the reason why the government announced that they increased the ODA is towards this negotiation for the COP28 host, because it really depends on how much ODA contribution is there for climate change as well. So that can be one of the factors, many factors. I might be wrong, but that can be one reason I can think of. And also, you also asked, can it be related to Korea's split pursuit of national interest? Yes, of course. South Korea made it clear in its white paper of development cooperation that it's not only about altruistic, but it also has a national interest in it as well. So that can be included. But I haven't had a chance to investigate public reactions yet, so I don't think I can deliver the answer for that question. And about the TRIPS waiver and the South Korean the civil, the government reaction. I haven't had a chance to investigate about this, but maybe Professor Kim knows something about this, because Professor Kim also is heavily involved in the development cooperation in Korea. So I will hand over this question to Professor Kim, if I may. Thank you.
Do you have something to say?
I don't know how to answer that question, but let me add a little bit on the second question from the Jaeun No from the Australia. The South Korean government, I just get involved in the making the third round of the general plan for South Korea International Development Plan for 5 years, from this year to 2025. So the key vision of the South Korean general plan is how to enhance the Korea, like the national interest through the ODA for the mutual respect or mutual, like the cooperation with the global community. So this is for the first time in South Korean history to include national interest in the very the top vision of the international development policies. So as far as I know, remember correctly, the UK is the first country in the world to include the national interest in the top vision motto of its own development policies back in 2007 or 8. And then after that, many countries followed the UK kind of the inclusion of the national interest without the modification, any single spelling, just national interest, 국익 in Korean. So the Korea is the first, like the trier to include the national interest, and how we can justify and then define what is the national interest. By the way, so national interest in this case is like the mutual respect and mutual cooperation with the global community. So global just produce global public goods, and we can contribute like the poverty reduction, and then the natural disaster should be tackled by the South Korean engagement and cooperation with the other partner countries. So national interest is not only for the South Korean only, but also for the whole the society in the world. So I think it's kind of mutual, and then or the little bit tricky. It sounds like tricky, but all major countries, I mean, OECD member countries, includes UK and the US, they move like that. So they need to save their own money for their own purpose, and as well as how they just enhance their public image through the ODA. We are contributing the global the challenges. Yeah, that's all I have for the second question.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. I would say that two presenters have done an excellent job, and I appreciate the patience of the audience. We'll have a short break, and I close this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.